Kia ora, koutou katoa, he mihi nui kia koutou katoa. That was just a greeting to all of you in my native te reo Māori language, tongue, and was just to say hello to all of you, warm wishes to all of you. My name is Marama Davidson, and I am the co-leader of the Green Party of Aotearoa, New Zealand. I am also privileged to be a minister for the prevention of family violence and sexual violence. I am also an associate housing minister in the area of homelessness. Just to let you all know, I'm really, really pleased to be joining you from Christchurch today, which is in the South Island of New Zealand. I'm actually in a big campsite area where our Green Party right now are holding what we call our sort of policy conference, I suppose. And so I'm in a big bunk room. I'm in a big bunk room with about 20 bunk beds in it. And we're all gathered here. There's about maybe over 200 of us gathered here at the moment for the whole weekend, and I've managed to find an empty room to come and talk with you. So thank you so much for having me. I looked over the sort of topic and some of the training that we're looking to do for this sort of Train the Trainer program, and on the issue of gender equity as an approach and a strategy. And so I hope that I can give a little bit of an overview as to what's happening here in Aotearoa and to what the Green Party has done and what visions and work we've got planned, if that's okay, if that hopefully helps your thinking and your understanding of other pockets of the world as well. So firstly, big warm greetings to our Asia Green Pacific networks and our women all around the world, and the massive job we've got ahead of us to really work towards a world that understands. I mean, we're talking about women, we're talking about gender equity. For me, as a Māori woman, I am Indigenous to Aotearoa. For me, that includes a founding understanding of the earth as our mother and of her as being absolutely related to our call for gender equity today. And that what we are actually doing is here in Aotearoa is wanting to uplift her, our earth mother, her status across all the work that we do, and reaffirm our connection and our responsibility to her as women, and therefore our responsibility to each other across communities of women and different groups of women. And so I thought I would start off with that understanding, which is the founding understanding for me, and it will lead into some of the other topics that I pick up through gender equity and what does that even mean. I wanted to give a bit of context for the political situation here at the moment in Aotearoa. Some of you might know we have slowly been increasing our number of women MPs in New Zealand Parliament. Currently we used to be well under 30% in my lifetime. We've sort of hung above 30% of representatives being women throughout most of my lifetime. In the 2017 election, we finally hit the 40% makeup of women parliamentarians. And then at the 2020 election, we went even higher. Actually didn't have time to find the exact number, but you'll probably be able to find it quicker than me. And we're well above our 40% and on our way to 50%, which will be amazing. In the Green Party, currently, right now, we have 10 members of Parliament, and 7 of our members, of our Green MPs, are women, and we have 3 males. Last term, from 2017 to 2020, we had a real imbalance. We had 6 female Green MPs and only 2 male Green MPs. And I think it's quite interesting to understand how. Now, traditionally, the Green Party in New Zealand has always been leading when it comes to male and female representation in our MPs. One reason for that, well, there are many reasons. I thought I would try and unpack some of the reasons for that, include having an understanding of political context. The Green Party, when we recruit our list, when we recruit our candidates, and when we make up our final parliamentary list, which is when we rank our MPs, we have a mixed member proportional system here. You can stand as a list MP, not an electorate MP. So none of us, nor traditionally, we have only stood as list MPs rather than standing as a candidate for a particular electorate location. What that means is the Green Party has had to rank our MPs in order. Currently at this time, I am number 1 in our list. Even though we have co-leadership, we still rank our full list, and I am number 1, and James Shaw, my co-leader, is number 2. However, in saying that, because we are the Green Party, because we have a strong history and recognition of gender equity, I think that it's an unspoken understanding that our female co-leader should be at number 1. If we can't have both our co-leaders at number 1, then it should be our female co-leader at number 1. And that is what has happened. I am the 3rd co-leader and a female co-leader, and we have all been at number 1 on our list. The fact that we have co-leaders is in itself a structural response to the imbalance of the broader political framework. So the Green Party in Aotearoa has been doing some heavy lifting to try and make up for the gender inequity and the lack of representation across the whole of politics. We've been doing more than our fair share. Other political parties are nowhere near where we are. Some of the political parties are appalling in terms of their representation of female politicians. Yes, so part of the response to power inequity, because that's what gender inequity is for me at least, is responding to power imbalance, is really what we are trying to do in the Green Party. And so we have to be intentional about solutions, about systems to address that power imbalance. And one of the ways the Green Party has done that is to have co-leaders and co-conveners throughout the entire different levels of our party. So it's not just co-leaders at the political level, at the leader level. So in Parliament, you have myself and James Shaw, as I said, but all through our branches and our networks across the country, we have a co-convener model. We have a model where it is not just one person, and we stipulate that we make sure that our co-conveners share the role, that it must include at least one woman or female. And I wanted to sort of highlight that, that is part of how to be intentional in your policy, in our policy systems. A lot of things, however, are not so intentional, are not clear and stipulated. But I think another reason why we have such a big pool, we're fortunate to have such a big pool of amazing women in the Green Party, not just at our politician level, not just as our parliamentarians, but all throughout our branches, all throughout our networks. We have incredible Green women. And I was thinking about why that is. Why is that? Because we do not have a policy in recruitment. We do not have something that is intentional that says, please go out into the communities and find all these amazing women and make sure they join the Green Party. What I think we do have, though, are visions and approaches and political positions that we have found in our own research. We appeal to women. Our style of politics, our solutions, our staunch stand on standing up for gender equity. We are unapologetic when it comes to things like equal pay, pay equity. We are unapologetic when it comes to support for all people who call themselves women, including trans women. We are unapologetic about support for our rainbow communities and our rainbow women. We are unapologetic for support for disabled women, and so on and so forth. And why I wanted to say that is because for me, gender equity is not just about gender equity. Gender equity also needs to have an intersectional lens and acknowledge all of the other historical, cultural, economic, colonial, and social contexts. And so that is why gender equity is also about decolonisation and re-indigenisation. We cannot be proactive about gender equity here in Aotearoa without committing as a party to affirming the status of Māori women and Indigenous women. And we are, as a party, and we for a long time were one of the only political parties to give an explicit commitment to Te Tiriti o Waitangi. Now, Te Tiriti o Waitangi here is the Treaty of Waitangi, but the Green Party specifically affirms Te Tiriti, which is the Indigenous Reo Māori text, the Māori version of the treaty, which we prioritise over and above the English version, because the English version has a completely different meaning. The English version denies the sovereignty of Indigenous people here, whereas the Māori version affirms the sovereignty of Indigenous people here. Now, any discussion about colonisation and sovereignty, therefore, has to understand the role of Indigenous women and the impact that colonisation has had on destroying the status of Māori women here in Aotearoa in New Zealand. So we cannot talk about gender equity here unless we acknowledge the colonisation of this country and how it has undermined Indigenous women here. So this is why I believe, while we haven't had a proactive recruitment policy, we've got some intentional policies to have representation, but in everything else, we attract women, and our research in ourselves that we have done has always shown that young women, women in general, we have a large following for our party. I also wanted to pick up, I'm just looking at some of my notes that I made here. For me, gender equity, what it is a response to power imbalance, which I talked about before. Power imbalance, when we are talking about colonisation, when we are talking about the patriarchy, when we are talking about imperialism, all of these things have happened in Aotearoa, New Zealand. They all draw their breath from the same sources of oxygen. They are all connected forms of oppression. And we've been very clear here, as people have been around the world, that patriarchal understandings and values are bad for all genders. They restrict progressive policy, they restrict gender equity, and that is bad for all genders. So I guess I'm just sort of trying to highlight that we take a very clear, proactive understanding of the role of power, oppression, and privilege, and that gender equity is only one part of addressing and recorrecting that imbalance of power and oppression and privilege. And so here in the Greens right now, here at this policy conference that I'm at right now, for example, we have prioritised a whole of party increasing its understanding and its commitment to equity when it comes to gender equity, racial equity, ability equity, so disabled women in communities, and so on and so forth, and that is directly linked to the prevention of family violence and sexual violence, especially against women. And the link to our work in the space of, and the Green Party's leading work in the space of the prevention of violence, especially against women and girls, also draws its breath from an understanding of colonisation as being the original form of violence here in this country. And so we continue to connect those dots. We continue to be very clear that violence against women is explicitly related to violence against our planet, that the exploitation of resources and the environment, that the pollution of water, the pollution of soil and air, the exploitation of fossil fuels and dirty energy sources, of unsustainable energy sources, the intensification of farming, which ruin, and the intensive agricultural practices that ruin our rivers and our soils, are all an affront to the violence towards the planet, which is directly linked to violence towards women. And Indigenous peoples around the world have this understanding. And we are still working on making sure that all peoples have this understanding, and we're not there yet here in Aotearoa. But the causes of extreme capitalism and colonisation was the tool for extreme capitalism, which was the accumulation of land and wealth for the benefit of a few, is directly linked to the violence against our earth and our rivers, our soil, our native animals, biodiversity, our broader ecosystem. And that same attitude is reflected in our unfortunate, tragic rates and unacceptable rates of violence against women here. So I guess I was sort of pointing out that the Green Party holds this broader, deeper understanding of gender equity in everything we do, including in how we set up our own processes and our structures, and our political positions, our policy creation as well, and our campaigning in political areas. So I think that might be enough from me for now. I think that people, in terms of sort of train the trainer work and gender equity work across Green parties, I guess that people might want to know a little bit more about our systems in terms of how the Green Party operates. So I'm really happy for people to ask any questions if that's going to be technologically appropriate. But I will hand it back to you, I think, Michelle, if you have any suggestions.
Thank you very much, Marama. I really enjoyed that. It was very interesting to see all the links, I think, or to hear of them so articulately. Let's ask, is there any questions for Nepal first? Rachna and Durga, do you have any questions?
So one of the questions that our participant was, what was the first step that we should do? Like for you as a minister, what was the first step you did on advocating against family violence and prevention for?
Oh, great question. So just to repeat that to make sure that I'm clear, you're asking around what were the first steps to advocate against family violence, sexual violence, especially against women and children. Have I got that correct, Rachna? Yep.
Perfect.
Yeah, really great question, because it gives me the opportunity to answer that. I quickly have to give a brief couple of sentences about the context of violence here. We still have really unacceptable rates of violence here. For European or Pākehā women here, 1 in 3 women will experience family or sexual violence, especially from an intimate partner. For Māori women, that is worse. It is 1 in 2. For disabled women, it is even worse. And so the violence worsens for people of different groups. So rainbow women have another extra level of harm. Young women in general, older people also, and older women experience another concerning level of harm. And also our migrant, ethnic and minority communities also have experienced another level of harm that is also worse than just the overall level of harm against women. So we also, for many, many years, our response to violence has been very much government-led, state-led, state-heavy, and it has focused on the response as opposed to the prevention. So that violence, as we all know, comes from and I guess happens in the context of still having masculine and patriarchal and sexist views against women. And it also comes from, unfortunately, still having rape culture as a part of our norms. So when we have got that context, then my big priorities in my role, in my portfolio, are to shift the resourcing and the work to the prevention space. At the moment, less than 1%, at the moment, only 1%, I think it's less, of our resourcing and our capacity is concentrated on prevention. Everything else is all response. So all of that funding is going to violence after the fact that it has happened. What we are wanting to shift to is preventing violence in the first place. What does that even mean? It means that the prevention programs, the prevention work must be created and designed by communities, by Indigenous women, and it must be resourced. And that responsibility of resourcing and empowering and giving the authority of community-led work is the government's responsibility. Unfortunately, so far, we have had agency-heavy leadership, and that has not worked. Also, the agency responses have been siloed and individualized. So we have a whole lot of stuff happening across a whole range of agencies. So my ministerial portfolio pulls together 10 agencies in accident compensation, health, education, our Māori department, our justice department, our police, our courts, our children's department, and our Prime Minister's department. And I think I might be missing one other, but you get the idea that, the biggest department, our social welfare department. There's been bits and pieces of safety response work happening when it comes to violence all across those 10 agencies, and no one was talking to each other. So I have a joint venture unit, which is sort of like, it's not a department yet, it's not a ministry yet because it's new. It will eventually be formalized into some form, but right now I have a unit that pulls together work from all of those 10 agencies and tries to join it up. Whole of government work joining it up, but also joining up the work of government to community, and also joining up the work of community amongst itself as well. So a whole lot of joining up happening, and we're in early days, but that's where my priorities and my advocacy go. And I think finally on that, one of the biggest prevention streams of work that we have to do is end rape culture, end sexist attitudes, end toxic masculinity attitudes and behavior, end patriarchal approaches to our communities. Now that's long work, that's generational work, that is. And there are lots of different ways that needs to happen. But for a start, just recognizing the place of women in leadership positions at all levels. You know, we haven't done that yet properly. So I guess there are sort of three big things there: diversity, focus on prevention, community leadership, and above all of that, working together to put up healthier attitudes, behavioural change that needs to take place across our entire country. There you go. Kia ora.
Thank you, Marama. India or Bangladesh, do you have any questions, the women from those parties?
India had a bad connection and they couldn't connect well while Minister was talking. So maybe they will, see the recording later if possible. So I have a suggestion and I have a request that if Minister could, give a final, suggestion or a note for the trainers, gender equity trainers, because they are from 4 different countries, a final message for the trainers.
Sure, Anita, I'm very happy to do that. Also recognizing you've probably got a full program as well too. So I guess, oh my goodness, if I was to think of a final message, I think it is just drawing on what I've already talked about. And when it comes to your gender equity trainers, some of the best programs that I have seen and been a part of, and I managed to read through a little bit of the training program manual that I was sent, and I managed to read through a little bit of that, and I think it's got some really fantastic stuff. I guess for gender equity training, for me, any opportunity I have to create collectives of people working for change, because that's what gender equity trainers are. They are groups of people working for change and helping to support, build that knowledge and skill across political parties, across groups to work for change. Whenever I'm doing that in community, whenever I am a part of that, I always end up realizing that there is so much more breadth and skill and insight and solutions in the room, in the community, than I thought there was. And so a focus on continuing to allow that space to dig deep into what people have to offer, what people are bringing to the table. And this is because the Green Party here in Aotearoa are very clear about what community-led means to us. Community leadership really does mean understanding that the expertise, the skill and the experience of what is happening in the communities really lays at community. And so taking that focus, that explicit focus, to find out exactly, to give that time exactly to research, to dig deep into what is in the room, what is in the community, for me has been essential to any of that sort of capacity building work, any of that sort of trainer work, I suppose. And I don't know if that's useful at all, but that's just something that I sort of thought of as a final comment. And I guess other than that, sort of digging deep into, I guess I'm saying that from my context, because here in New Zealand, we have not valued community expertise. We just have not. We have undermined it. We have ignored it. We have patronized communities. So that's coming from my own context. We haven't done that well, and I think communities around the world could do that better. But I think the overall final thought from me is to really, and this is because we haven't done this well in Aotearoa either, the intersectional approach, and remembering we cannot talk about gender equity unless we are talking about economic justice, climate justice, environmental justice, colonial justice, Indigenous rights, rainbow rights, and so on and so forth. So it really is understanding of all of the inequities and therefore all of the equities that need to be addressed. I hope that was useful. Thank you so much for having me. Thank you so much for giving me some time with you all.